before we dive into the dark, twisted, and occasionally, what the actual hell side of humanity. Here's a quick note from our imaginary legal team, which consists of a sleep-deprived parent, Google, and a stress ball named Greg. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes. Yes. Both. It's just me, researching these cases like your overly invested ex creeping your socials, thoroughly, obsessively, and with just a hint of judgment. The opinions here are entirely my own and do not represent law enforcement, lawyers, doctors, or your cousin Karen who thinks she's a detective because she binged 4 crime docs and made a Pinterest board. Also, everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, even if the vibes are giving that, yep, they did it. And no, I'm not a licensed psychologist or a doctor, just someone with a brain full of psychology textbooks, way too much coffee, and disturbing level of curiosity. And sometimes, there's a handsome guy who's mostly here for the snacks and the dramatic one-liners. So do your own research. I'm here for insight, empathy, and storytelling. Full disclaimers in the episode description.
If you're new here, welcome to my little corner of chaos. I'm Rachel, and I host Crime Unleashed with frequent appearances from my husband Rob and other brave souls I can rope in along the way. This is what I do at night, instead of sleeping like normal people. So, you bring the snacks, the blanket, and your favorite drink, and I'll open the case file. Let's go. A simple message. I landed. That's what our parents received in the middle of the night. The kind of text that helps them sleep better. That lets them breathe easier. But this time, that message would be the last they'd ever get from her. She stepped off a plane, alone, and walked straight into the arms of something no one saw coming. By morning, no trace, no phone, no heartbeat in the digital world. She didn't just vanish, she was hunted, targeted. Someone wanted to erase her completely. This wasn't random, this wasn't sudden, this was planned. This is a story about the monsters we fear. Not the ones hiding under the bed, but the ones in plain sight, waiting at the park, behind a dating profile. Living everyday, normal lives to the world. This is the tragic story of Mackenzie Lueck. Welcome to Crime Unleashed.
Before we start, a content trigger warning. This episode includes graphic descriptions of kidnapping, physical violence, murder, and the desecration of human remains. It also contains discussion of psychological manipulation and forensic recovery that may be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Please take care of yourself.
Mackenzie Lueck was a 23-year-old University of Utah student from California. She lived in a coastal town in Los Angeles County. She was born March 8, 1996, and she was the only daughter of Greg and Diana Lueck and had 3 brothers. By all accounts, Mackenzie was warm, ambitious, responsible, and deeply loved by her family. Now, she had flown home just days earlier to attend her grandmother's funeral, so she flew home to California, but she lived in Utah. A sign of how close-knit her family was that she always visited them. But after saying her goodbyes, she returned back to Utah to continue her studies. Mackenzie was majoring in kinesiology. kinesiology, and pre-nursing. She had her own place near the campus and had been there for some time. It was the early morning hours of June 17th, 2019. It was around 1:35 a.m., actually 1:35 a.m. to be exact, when she landed at Salt Lake City International Airport. Security cameras captured her walking through the airport alone, calm and composed, dragging her luggage. Nothing seemed off though, no signs of distress. Just a young woman traveling back to school, likely exhausted, maybe still grieving, but safe. When she arrived, she did what every good daughter would do. She texted her parents to let them know she landed safely. And let me just pause right there, because that moment hits hard. As a mom myself, that's something I always ask my kids to do. Just text me when you land, just text me when you get home. Let me know you're okay. And Mackenzie did everything right. She followed those rules. She checked in. She sent that text. And heartbreakingly, that would be the last message her parents would ever receive from her. A text so ordinary, so responsible, something she knew to do. Now reduced to a haunting reminder that she was fine one second and the next gone. A short time later, Mackenzie ordered a Lyft. But she wasn't headed straight home. Instead, she requested the Lyft to take her to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, a quiet public park about 8 miles from the airport. It was about 2:40 a.m., so why head to the park at that hour? Who meets someone in the dark? The Lyft driver reported that Mackenzie seemed calm. She didn't appear afraid or hesitant. When they arrived at Hatch Park, she got out of the vehicle and willingly walked over to a man waiting near the car, someone she clearly expected to meet. The Lyft driver left. The clock ticked past 3 a.m., and from that moment on, Mackenzie Lueck was never seen alive again. Now, while Mackenzie did text her parents upon landing, it turns out that her final text ever wasn't to them. It was to a man named Ayola Ajayi at exactly 2:58 a.m. Think about that. The Lyft driver had just dropped her off at Hatch Park and said he saw her walk up to a man waiting there. She didn't seem nervous, no hesitation, she just got in the car. But what happens next is where this story takes a truly eerie turn. Because just 1 minute after she sent that final text, at 2:59 a.m., Mackenzie's phone was turned off, completely powered down. Now let me ask you, why? Why would a 23-year-old woman alone in the dark in a park suddenly shut her phone off? Why remove her only link to help, her only connection to safety? Even if she did know this man well, why turn it off within 60 seconds of meeting him? Unless, of course, she didn't turn it off at all. That's where my mind goes. Was the phone taken from her? Was it powered down by the killer and not her? Did something happen right there in the park in the shadows as the Lyft driver pulled away, unaware that he may have just dropped someone off into a death trap? It's hard not to imagine that exact moment, 2:59 a.m. The final second she existed in the digital world. A second later, she was gone. No text, no calls, no social media, nothing. So then the silence began. The man Mackenzie met at Hatch Park that night was the same man that she had sent that last text to, Ayola Ajayi. At the time, he was 31 years old, born in 1988, and working in IT support. He was also a former Utah State University student and had served briefly in the Utah Army National Guard, though his service ended after 6 months in 2015. What's especially chilling is that this wasn't his first time under police scrutiny. Back in 2014, Ajayi had been investigated for sexual assault in North Logan, Utah. A woman came forward and reported the incident, but ultimately no charges were filed. The details of the case were sealed, but the fact that there was a prior investigation paints a much darker picture in hindsight. A predator possibly hiding in plain sight for years. Ajayi had been living in Salt Lake City for several years by the time he met Mackenzie. He owned a home in the Fair Park neighborhood, not far from downtown. And it's important to note, this home had a detached garage with a backyard fire pit. That detail would become significant later on, and I'll get to that. He was originally from Nigeria and had immigrated in the United States in the early 2000s. Though on paper he appeared to be doing well, with work in tech, home ownership, and published writing, his behavior told a different story. Several people who knew him described him as arrogant, controlling, and obsessed with appearances. He claimed to be an author and even tried to pitch a book to a publisher, one that described a man luring a woman into traps and burning their bodies. Seriously, that was in his manuscript. Looking back, the signs were there, but no one connected the dots in time. Neighbors would later tell police that Ajayi was often seen burning things in this backyard at odd hours. He kept to himself, but presented as clean-cut, polite, and normal to a lot of people. But beneath the surface, he exhibited traits consistent with antisocial behavior: manipulation, superficial charm, and a lack of empathy, and a calculated willingness to harm. Now, police later confirmed that Ajayi had been in contact with Mackenzie through a dating app, one reportedly known for, quote, sugar baby arrangements. And just to be clear, a sugar baby arrangement is when a younger person, often a woman, forms a relationship with an older or wealthier individual in exchange for money, gifts, or other support. It's not always sexual, but it's often transactional. And unfortunately, these kinds of arrangements can often attract predators who exploit blurred boundaries and power dynamics. Whether that was Mackenzie's intent or not, we don't know, but the two had exchanged messages for weeks. Some sources even say that they'd met in person before, but how well she actually knew him, that's still very, very unclear. What we do know is that this meeting was planned. She chose that park and she chose to get in the car. So by all accounts, it appeared that she believed that she was meeting someone she trusted. And instead, she walked into something far darker. According to official reports and phone data, police were able to confirm that the man Mackenzie met at Hatch Park was indeed Ajayi. His phone pinged in the same location at the same time as hers, and the Lyft driver described a man waiting there that matched Ajayi's build. It has been 3 days since Mackenzie landed in Salt Lake City, and in those 3 days, not a word, not a call, no social media, nothing. Her friends and family tried to stay calm at first. Maybe she was grieving, maybe she needed space. But when Mackenzie missed a scheduled flight and then failed to show up for a midterm exam, that's when the alarms really started taking off. Her parents officially reported her missing at around 4 p.m. on the third day. The thing was, Mackenzie had apparently booked a short trip, though it's unclear if it was a school-related or something personal. But what's important is that she didn't board it, and there was no activity on her phone or bank accounts in those 72 hours. That was a major red flag. Her friends began posting on social media, sharing her photo and desperately asking for help. Some classmates said that it was completely out of character. She was always reliable, always in touch. And by all accounts, Mackenzie was not the type to just disappear. Meanwhile, though, while Mackenzie's loved ones were panicking and organizing search efforts, Ajayi was burning evidence in his backyard. No exaggeration. Neighbors would later tell police that on June 17th, just hours after Mackenzie was last seen, they saw Ajayi in his backyard lighting a large fire. It lasted all through that night. He told them he was, quote, burning some old items. Police would eventually find freshly dug soil, charred fabric, and bone fragments behind his garage. Once Mackenzie was officially listed as missing, Salt Lake City police wasted no time. Investigators began checking cell phone records, credit card transactions, and ride-sharing history. Finally, on June 25th, 2019, they released the last known surveillance footage of Mackenzie at Salt Lake City International Airport. The footage shows her walking calmly through the terminal, pulling on her suitcase. She appears composed, alert, and in control. There's no sign that anything was wrong. It's just a young woman returning from a trip. This footage not only confirmed her safe arrival, it also anchored the timeline. From there, the investigation turned to her Lyft ride, the one that picked her up around 2:40 a.m. on June 17th and dropped her at Hatch Park. Through cell phone data and digital forensics, they confirmed Mackenzie voluntarily got into another vehicle at Hatch Park. Her phone was powered off just 1 minute later at 2:59 a.m. Her last text had been sent to Ajayi, the man she was meeting. Investigators then cross-referenced Ajayi's phone data and it placed him in the exact same location, Hatch Park, as I mentioned, at the same time. This was the first major break in the case. When police brought Ajayi in for questioning, he tried to act cooperative, cool, calm, smiling. He denied knowing Mackenzie, claimed he never met her, which is truly funny because it's on your phone. Said he had no clue why her phone data linked to his. Okay. He really hadn't thought through all of this because I don't even know. Maybe he thought he would get away with it. He even tried to give an alibi that he was, quote, visiting baby mama. Then he generously gave consent to search certain parts of his phone, and even offered up security footage from his home, but it turned out to be conveniently missing. The time frame in question was not there. What an idiot. Seriously. I mean, how could he not know that the evidence was already stacking up against him? But even more, that everything was on his phone. Then came the cadaver dogs. The next day, investigators served a search warrant at Ajayi's property, a tidy, unassuming home in the Fair Park neighborhood of Salt Lake City. But in his backyard, it was a different story. Cadaver dogs quickly alerted to an area near the fire pit located behind the detached garage. When police started digging, they unfortunately, sadly, uncovered burned human tissue, charred pieces of female clothing, a partially melted wallet later confirmed to belong to Mackenzie, fragments of her skull, missing her scalp, muscle tissue, bone fragments, and other evidence. At this point, Ajayi was no longer just a suspect. He was a predator caught in a web of lies. When confronted about the evidence in his backyard, Ajayi offered a weak explanation. He said he'd been, quote, burning some personal items. When pressured further, he became defensive and evasive. He never admitted to knowing Mackenzie. Not yet. But despite the physical evidence at home, Mackenzie's body was not found there. But the search was not over. While combing through Ajayi's home, detectives made a disturbing discovery: a secret, soundproofed room in the basement. It wasn't just insulated, it was constructed with drywall and padding and included hooks on the walls, a lock from the outside, and no windows. Investigators would later learn that he had asked a contractor to build it months earlier, under the excuse that he needed, quote, a private study room. Even more disturbing, when they dug into his online activity, they found that Ajayi had previously posted a Craigslist ad looking for women to role-play scenarios involving kidnapping and captivity. And I just want to throw this out there. Please, please do not meet with strangers alone. This really does happen all the time. It's not just a 1 in a million kind of thing that, quote, might happen to someone else. This is something that sadly in today's world happens far too often, and we have to be aware of it. Because here's the thing. He was actively using dating apps under fake names, luring women with his lies, false identities, and promises of cash. It's not just creepy, it's calculated, and it's happening every day. Ajayi was finally cracking. Facing overwhelming evidence and increasing pressure, he finally led authorities to a remote area of Logan Canyon about 85 miles north of Salt Lake City. I am curious when all this happened, though, because let's go back a second. I mentioned that neighbors would later tell police that on June 17th, just hours after Mackenzie was last seen, they saw Ajayi in his backyard lighting a large fire. So when did he dump the body? They found her 85 miles away and she went missing at 3 a.m. But he was already burning stuff in his backyard that night, the same day as her going missing. Like he wasted no time. So what happened in between? And why didn't he use that secret soundproof room? It seems like it all happened so fast, and my hope is that she just put up a really big fight. At Logan Canyon, Ajayi directed them to a shallow grave, hidden among the trees and brush. Inside were the charred remains of Mackenzie Lueck. Her arms had been bound behind her back, which I mentioned, with a zip tie. Her body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the head. A gas canister and burned personal items were found nearby, suggesting that he had tried to destroy her body and eliminate evidence. The medical examiner later confirmed, as I had mentioned, that she had died from repeated blows to the head, consistent with being struck by a blunt object, possibly a baseball bat. But incredibly, he still did not confess to the murder of Mackenzie. In fact, he would continue to say that he did not do it, that he had no idea. Even after all of that, Ajayi still refused to say anything about it, despite the phone records, despite the evidence found in his backyard. Despite literally leading police to her buried remains, he continued to claim he didn't do it. He made vague statements, he stalled, he manipulated, he really tried to maintain his innocence. With mounting evidence, media pressure, and the horrifying discovery of Mackenzie's body in Logan Canyon, Ajayi finally told them what happened in detail. A little over a year later, on October 7th, 2020, in a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, he finally gave his first and only confession in court to the brutal murder of Mackenzie Lueck. And what he admitted was chilling. He provided graphic details of what he did to her, but he didn't answer all the questions. Now, this next part is heartbreaking, but her story needs to be told, because silence protects predators, but stories protect people. He said Mackenzie came willingly to his home after their meeting at Hatch Park. He lured her into his house and then into his backyard where he'd already prepared the scene. But really quick, I wanted to mention something here that I am very curious about. I looked everywhere to find out why her phone shut off at 2:59 a.m., especially if she was, quote, willing to come to his home, because her last text was at 2:58 and she was in the car of that Lyft. And then at 2:59, when she was in the car with Ajayi, her phone shut completely off. I'm curious about that. He never gave a clear answer, and no official explanation was ever confirmed publicly that I could find. He did, however, claim that the murder was a, quote, spur-of-the-moment act. But here's what I can say, and these are my own personal opinions of what the two most likely theories are based on public records and forensic behavior. Again, my personal opinion. 1. Ajayi took and shut off the phone immediately after she got in the car. Maybe he took it without her knowing somehow, or he just snatched it from her. This would mean he intended to isolate her from help the moment she entered into his vehicle. That would contradict his claim, though, that the murder was spontaneous. That points toward premeditation and control, which, by the way, I absolutely feel is already premeditated. And why does this make sense to me? Well, the fact that her phone never turned back on and was later found burned suggests that he likely took it and destroyed it intentionally. Or 2, Mackenzie shut off her own phone, possibly to keep the meetup private. This theory leans into Ajayi's version that she came, quote, willingly and didn't want their interaction tracked. Some suggest it could have been an arrangement she didn't want public, especially if it was through a, quote, sugar daddy app. But this theory feels a bit weak. Family and friends describe Mackenzie as like a safety-conscious woman, shutting off her phone in the middle of the night in a dark park with a stranger. That doesn't seem to align with her behavior or character. The fact that her phone was powered off within 1 minute of the meeting and was never turned back on again strongly suggests Ajayi took it and shut it off himself. That simple act, disabling her lifeline, may have been the first step in the attack, but I don't know, and I don't know if anybody would ever know. Okay, so back to the court confession. He lured her into his house, and then he, got her into the backyard where he already prepared the scene. There, he somehow got her down and tied her arms behind her back with zip ties, which he did not go into detail about. He did go into detail that he repeatedly struck her in the head with a blunt object. Again, not what? Reportedly just a metal rod or a bat, until she stopped moving. Once she was dead, he set her body on fire in his backyard in that fire pit. He admitted to burning her personal belongings, including her phone, clothing, and ID, and then burying the charred remains in 2 separate locations, one being part of his yard and the other in Logan Canyon. He did this all alone, no accomplices, no remorse. Again, as I mentioned, he called it a spur-of-the-moment decision, but there is no doubt it was premeditated. The thing is, Ajayi was not insane, nor was he disorganized. He was methodical, strategic, and cold. His behavior reflects traits seen in antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy. So, superficial charm, which well-spoken, socially capable. He has got this grandiose self-image, which claimed to be a published author, entrepreneur, and a tech expert. Manipulation, which used dating apps under a fake name, lured women with lies, would be part of that. Lack of empathy or remorse. Never showed real emotion. Even during sentencing, he didn't show this. Dehumanization of victims, which built a soundproof room, planned to burn and bury evidence. He had this written in his manuscript. He wanted control, not connection. He wanted power, not a partnership. And he built his life to appear normal on the outside while planning violence in the shadows. He had researched burning bodies. He had written fictional stories eerily similar to what he'd actually done to Mackenzie. He had a room designed for captivity. This wasn't a moment of rage or manic or anything like that. Sadly, it was a culmination of something dark he had likely fantasized about for a long time. And unfortunately, Mackenzie was the person he chose to make those fantasies real. She wasn't a mistake. She wasn't random. She was targeted because he thought he could get away with it. But what he didn't count on was that people would care, that investigators would chase every lead, that her friends would raise their voices, and that her family would never stop fighting for her justice. Ajayi stole Mackenzie's future, but they weren't going to let him get away with it. But still, his entire confession was still deliberately limited. He admitted to luring Mackenzie to his home, tying her up, striking her in the head, burning her body, burying her remains, but he never explained why her scalp was missing, any psychological motive beyond calling it a spur-of-the-moment act, why her phone shut off within 60 seconds of getting into the car, what kind of fight she put up, why he never used the secret room. When Ajayi called it a, quote, spur-of-the-moment act, I think what he really meant was that something interrupted whatever plan he originally had. Again, that's just my opinion. It's clear he intended to use that soundproof room. That space wasn't built by accident. And let's be honest, it wasn't meant for studying. But something had to have changed. Maybe Mackenzie sensed that something was wrong. Maybe she resisted. Maybe she made it clear that there was no way she was going to be controlled. And so instead of carrying out whatever twisted fantasy he had planned, he panicked and killed her. It wasn't spur of the moment. It was a plan that didn't go his way. And when control slipped out of his hands, he chose violence. Either way, he'll spend the rest of his life in a cage of his own making. But it doesn't bring her back. And for her family, it may never feel like true justice. Hopefully, though, it somehow offers something that many families in this horrible situation never get, and that's answers. They were able to bring their daughter home to lay her to rest, to know without question where she is now, not lost in the unknown, but held in peace. And for grieving parents, that kind of closure could be everything. The case exploded across headlines nationwide. A young, promising student, a secretive meeting, a clean-cut suspect with a dark double life. It had all the makings of a true crime nightmare, but sadly, this one was real. Salt Lake City Police Chief Mike Brown held an emotional press conference. He confirmed the timeline, praised the work of the forensic team, and emphasized just how devastating this case was for everyone involved. He choked up when talking about Mackenzie's parents, saying, quote, "This is not the outcome we wanted. This is not the ending anyone hoped for." Social media lit up with grief, confusion, and rage. People were shocked at how normal Ajayi had seemed, how easily he blended in. But once the public saw his mugshot, heard the timeline, and learned about the soundproof room, the fear shifted into disgust, of course. Mackenzie's parents, Greg and Diana Lueck, were absolutely shattered, and what parent wouldn't be? I can't and don't want to even imagine what they went through, especially finding out how she passed, how she died. They stayed mostly private during the investigation, but after Ajayi's arrest and confession, her father stood before the court and delivered one of the most gut-wrenching victim impact statements imaginable. He said, quote, "I see Mackenzie's friends getting married, starting careers, traveling the world, things Mackenzie will never get to do. My wife and I never get to walk her down the aisle. We'll never see her graduate, get married, or have children." He ended by saying, quote, "Ajayi is a monster. He's evil. Mackenzie died in a horrific death at the hands of a selfish, cowardly man." No words can really capture that kind of pain. And the most heartbreaking part, they had no way of knowing this would happen. No warning signs, no red flags glaring enough to stop it, because she'd done the right things. She had texted them to let them know that she was safe, that she was there, she had landed. On October 23rd, 2020, just a year after Mackenzie's murder, Ajayi was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He stood before the court wearing shackles and a face mask and offered a brief, emotionless apology, quote, "I'm sorry for what I did. I deserve what I'm going to get." The judge didn't hold back. He called Ajayi's actions brutal, cold, and calculated, and said the sentence reflected the gravity of what Mackenzie endured. Ajayi also received an additional sentence for obstruction of justice and abuse of desecration of a human body to be served consecutively. Gosh. He is now serving time in Utah State Prison, where he will die behind bars. Mackenzie Lueck did everything right. She checked in, she trusted someone, she thought she knew, and in a blink of an eye, she was gone. I want to just make sure to point out that this is a reflection of how easily predators can hide in plain sight. So before we go, I want to leave you with two questions. 1. How well do we really know the people we meet online? And what red flags are we willing to ignore when someone looks normal? 2. What would you do if your neighbor started burning stuff in his backyard and it smelled? So, it had to smell bad whenever Ajayi was doing this. So for me, that would be a red flag. But would you speak up or stay silent? The reason I ask is because sometimes silence lets monsters thrive. And sometimes they're closer than we think. Hey guys, my name is Rachel, and I wanted to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for anything, whatever it is you're doing. I appreciate it so much. I also wanted to tell you that I am a one-woman show, so I do all the editing, the videos, the research, all alone. So I am so grateful when you subscribe, comment, like, share. It means the world to me. So again, thank you. And I can't wait till next week to go over a new true crime story. Bye.